stories for bedtime
and car time and playtime.
And anytime you want to hear how much Jesus loves you in all this world.
Even little birds.
Hello, I'm Pastor Sarah at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. Welcome to this podcast where we tell stories told just for kids and kids at heart. Every week we tell a story about Jesus from the Bible. And for this podcast, you need to bring your imagination. We're going to imagine that there was a little bird in all of those Bible stories, a little bird who was friends with Jesus, a little bird who saw all the stuff that Jesus did and heard all the things that Jesus said. Well, podcast friends, I hope that you are all doing well today. This winter, we are telling stories about the people Jesus met or saw or hung out with. Today's story happened when Jesus was a grown-up, near the end of his life. Since we were just talking about him being a little baby, I want you to fast forward through Jesus growing up, and in your head, picture Jesus as a grown-up. By the time this story happens, he's well known by most of the people who lived around him, known for his teaching and his healing and his miracles. So, now that we're all together, let's listen to our story today. Season 2, Episode 14.
Little Bird and Jesus and the Generous Widow.
Jesus and his friends were in the big city of Jerusalem. He knew that the time would be coming soon when he would be arrested and likely killed. He was teaching his friends the most important things they would need to know about following him and making God's dream of love and life known in the world. The city of Jerusalem was full of a whole lot of people. So many people. And they were all so different. There were people from all over the world who came to Jerusalem to worship at the temple or to work in the many markets. Those people in the city were all sorts of different shapes and sizes and colors. It always amazed Little Bird how humans could all look so different. When Little Bird started to hang out with humans, she at first thought they all looked the same. But the more she spent time with them, the more she realized how beautifully different humans were. Little Bird knew that was just how it goes. People thought the same thing about sparrows, too, that they were all the same, just boring little brown birds. But like people, God made each sparrow unique. Little Bird loved to watch people when she was in that big city of Jerusalem, and that day Jesus was teaching at the temple in Jerusalem. They were sitting in one of the courtyards in an open space surrounded by tall stone walls. The place was full of people coming in to pray, to give their offerings to God, or to learn from the priests and other leaders and teachers like Jesus. As Jesus talked, Little Bird perched on some of the beautiful stones just above him. It was the perfect place for people watching. That day, she looked at all the different clothes that people wore, robes and dresses made from all sorts of different fabrics in a whole variety of patterns and colors. They were all so lovely. Little Bird watched people as they moved from here to there, some rushing quickly by to get something done. Some, especially in the temple, would walk slowly, almost prayerfully. And there were others who had on the most colorful, richest-looking robes, who seemed only to be there to show off whatever they were wearing. It reminded Little Bird of peacocks, those birds with big feathers which they would spread out like a big rainbow, and those peacocks would strut around, showing off how fancy and fantastic they were. The people in the temple looked like peacocks, walking around showing off their fancy, colorful robes and their gold chains and their jeweled rings. They looked sort of ridiculous to Little Bird. showing off just because they had money to buy fancy clothes. Jesus talked and talked and talked, and Little Bird got sort of restless. So she thought she'd try to imitate those rich people in their fancy robes. She fluffed up her brown and tan and cream feathers, and she held her head up as proud as she could. And then, as much as a little sparrow could strut, Little Bird strutted across the ledge she was standing on. She swayed and she strode, flouncing her little feathers with as much pompousness and swagger as she could, pretending to be those rich people with their flowing robes. Little Bird didn't think anyone was watching her put on the little show, but Jesus must have seen her, because mid-sentence he started to laugh. So she made one last turn on the stage for him and bowed majestically. Jesus gave her a quick little applause and a smile. And then, in an attempt to explain herself, she pointed her wing over to a very rich man in the most obnoxiously colored robe and the biggest emerald rings strutting around the temple. Jesus saw him right away. And then Jesus turned to his friends and the others who were gathered around him and said, "Do you see that rich man over there in all the fancy robes?" The friends who were listening turned to look at the man strutting around like a peacock. The rich man noticed and gave a twirl, showing off his beautiful robes. They all watched as the man continued toward the offering boxes at the temple. Little Bird had seen people putting coins, money, into those boxes. The boxes had a metal, trumpet-shaped top on them where people would put their offerings. Whenever the coins would go into those boxes, you would hear the sound of coins hitting the metal. And the more coins someone would give, the more clanging and clicking the coins made. The temple leaders would use those coins to support the temple and its worship, and they would give a lot of it to people who were hungry or homeless or in need. Well, that day, the man in the fancy robes went to one of those offering boxes, and he reached into his robe and pulled out a big coin purse. He looked back at Jesus and his friends to make sure they were still watching him, and in a very loud voice he said, "Dear God, thank you for making me so rich and so amazing." And then he poured his many coins into the offering box, and it made a loud clang, 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 clang sound. So many coins going into the box. Little Bird wasn't quite sure what to think. It was good that this man was giving to God, bringing this offering to God. But she also didn't think that looking impressive was the point. She didn't think that that was something to show off about. And even though there were lots of coins going into that offering box, she was pretty sure the man had so many more coins, he could have given so much more. She was thinking about this when Jesus said very quietly, "Do you see that woman over there? That poor widow?" Jesus' friends looked for her and saw her, a shorter woman, huddled over. Little Bird knew that things were hard for widows. Their husbands had died, and in Jesus' time, women couldn't work or even live alone. They were so dependent on all kinds of people to take care of them, and many times they were abandoned or forgotten. Little Bird saw that this woman had on an old robe, clean but worn thin, with lots of holes patched and patched again. The woman reached into her robes and pulled out 2 small coins, the smallest of all coins in those days, like pennies, worth the least amount of money. The widow quietly, prayerfully, took those 2 coins and put them in the offering box, and they made a quiet sound, the tiniest clink, clink. Jesus turned to his friends and said, It might look like that woman hardly gave anything at all. But the truth is, she gave more than all the others here put together. That man in his fancy robes and so many others came here, but they gave what they'll never miss. But that woman gave so much, more than she could afford. She gave everything she had, all she had to live on. She's the one we should all be like. Be like that widow. Share like her. Trust like her. The woman who had been quietly, slowly walking by turned to face Jesus. She must have heard him, heard those words that honored her, and she stood up a little taller with lots of pride, not because of her fancy clothes, but because of her extraordinary faith and her beautiful generosity. Her beauty came from the inside, from her heart. She smiled at Jesus, and Jesus smiled back and whispered, "God bless you, faithful woman." With her head held high, the widow walked confidently from them and disappeared into the crowd. Little Bird watched her and realized that she had imitated the wrong person that day. It wasn't the fancy person with their peacock walk that she should try to copy. Instead, it was that woman of faith. That was the person she wanted to be like, which was good because she was just a little sparrow after all and didn't have a whole lot to give. But that day she decided she'd be just like that widow and share whatever she could, whenever she could, no matter how little it was. Thank you for listening to this episode of Little Bird and Jesus. This would be a fun story to try to act out, to do your own walking around like a fancy person. So grab some coins and some costumes and dress up like that rich guy and walk around like you are all that fancy and important and majestic, like you're on a red carpet, and then make a big show of making your offering. And then try to be like that widow and be as quiet and hidden as you can as you make your gift. This story is a wonderful reminder about the importance of sharing. This would be a great week to practice sharing. Maybe share with your siblings at home or with friends at school. Find some ways to share your snack or your toys. And talk with your grown-ups about giving some of your coins from the piggy bank or other money you have to your church, or to an organization that feeds hungry people, or helps others in need, or responds to something that you care about. Every bit of generosity matters. And even if it feels like just a little is a lot. Just like that widow knew and trusted, and just like Jesus taught us. Have a great day today, and thank you for listening to this episode of Little Bird and Jesus.
Now flap your little wings. Sing a little song.
And remember that to Jesus,
You will always belong.
Thanks for listening to Little Bird and Jesus, a podcast of St. Paul Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. For more information on St. Paul, visit us at stpaulqc.org.